we focus a lot on the results at the expense of people. Even when we push ourselves too hard, it comes at a cost later down the line because we can't keep up that level of performance. And so we pay the price with our health, with our lower performance further down the line. We assume that other people have the same needs that we have, the same strengths that we have. And if someone doesn't, or if they can't see things the way we see them, it's really important to get under the skin and really understand that it's not one is better than the other.
I've seen more teams than you can imagine where conflict between individuals on the team, and it's usually a group of individuals against one, comes down to some of those basic core strengths or basic preferences in how you work. There are not very many of them, but boy, can they turn into a big drama.
You have to have a genuine interest in people. And I would argue that if you don't have that genuine interest, why are you managing people to begin with? So showing people that you genuinely care for them, that helps to build that sense of trust, that people know what to expect, people know what they're going to get with that as well.
Okay, I can't resist asking this one. Let's say, suppose I inherit a team and I do have good power and I have a good manager above me, but it's a really toxic culture. What am I supposed to do to correct that toxic culture?
If you've inherited this culture and this is how people behave here, you can...
There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing it all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of your comfort zone.
Welcome to the conversation today. All right, thriving at work. I know that may sound like an oxymoron and an impossible dream and a pipe dream even on top of that one, but I'd like to tell you it's possible. And I'd also like to tell you, you can do it for your team. That's what we want to talk to about today. What is it that you as a manager can do that is going to help your team feel that they're thriving? And hint, even if your manager isn't doing it for you, if you do it for your team, my guess is you are going to feel better as well. So that's the topic. How do you have a sense of thriving at work? My guest today is Aoife O'Brien. She's the founder of Happier at Work, and she's the host of this award-winning podcast, the Happier at Work podcast, which is ranked very highly globally, I would like to say. She's a culture and leadership expert with over 20 years corporate experience. She works with lots of global organizations to help them create the conditions where people can perform, grow, and stay. And her work focuses on aligning culture, on the drivers and capabilities so that people feel valued, clear, equipped to do their best, and that organizations can have sustainable performance, engagement, and retention. The book we're talking about today, the brand new debut book, is called Thriving Talent. So, Aoife, welcome to the show. It's a delight to have you here.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Wanda. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Exciting outline and exciting possibility, this notion of thriving at work. I think it's fabulous. So start at the top of that. What on earth do you mean by thriving? Like, is your definition weird on thriving relative to the rest of us on what thriving might mean?
I don't know. I would have to ask.
I doubt that.
I don't think it is. I think it's fairly standard. And I suppose for me, it stems from not feeling a sense of thriving at work. And I asked all of those difficult questions. What could I have done differently? What should leadership have been doing differently? What should HR have been doing differently? And I ask those questions and I answer those questions in the book as well. And so for me, thriving is really about sustainable performance. So it's not about performing and then at the expense of your health, but equally it's not being happy all the time, but you're actually underperforming. It's finding that balance between the two where you're performing at your best, but you're doing that in a sustainable way and you're looking after your well-being and the well-being of your team.
Okay, so like everything else that I see in leadership, there's a polarity involved. One is push, more performance, more results, faster. I think we all understand that one, and it's not very good because it isn't sustainable. And sustainable, I feel excited, enthusiastic, supported, well-being at work. But the balance between those two, like the perfect teeter-totter where it's equally in balance, the push for performance and the sustainable well-being. I love it.
That's exactly it. And I think sometimes we focus a lot on the results at the expense of people. And I know personally for myself, and I see it in other people as well, when we push ourselves too hard, it comes at a cost later down the line because we can't keep up that level of performance. And so we pay the price with our health. We pay the price with our lower performance further down the line.
I think that's the part many people don't recognize, is that when you are stressing yourself, excessively stressing yourself, a little bit of stress is good for performance, but excessively stressing yourself, your performance starts to decline. It will take you longer to do things. You'll make more mistakes. There's more pieces to recover you'll go back and do. And I just think we way underestimate what that does. And so we don't stop when we should stop. And come back at it with a refreshed point of view.
Exactly. And it's easy to fall into that trap. I fall into it myself. I'm human and I want to get good results and I want to push myself and I can see myself doing it. I'm close to burnout and I just want to keep going. But I've learned to recognize that in myself. I'm like, if I'm feeling that I need to just push on through, that's when I need to take a break, or I need to go for a walk or get some fresh air or do something and come back with, a sense of refreshment and able to tackle and not make mistakes.
Yeah, I know everybody listening feels like they don't have the time. And I'm going to tell you, if you don't take that 5 minutes of time, you're going to spend way more than 5 minutes in trying to recover. So sustainable performance. So I'm working at my best, but I'm also driving for great performance. I'm keeping that at balance, the two. All right, so the first word that comes to mind, it's on everybody's lips, the moment we start talking about this, is psychological safety. And you also say the psychological safety is foundational. Okay, I'm getting frustrated with psychological safety because we use it so much, like it's the answer to everything. So how do you actually know if your team is feeling psychologically safe?
You will know if you are getting pushback. You will know if people are speaking up, if they're sharing ideas. If they are saying, I have too much work on, then you will know that you have created a psychologically safe environment. If there is positive conflict, and we do need positive conflict, we need to have discussions at work, we need to have that open dialogue. If we have that, then you can be sure that you have created psychological safety. But I will say that the vast majority of teams don't have psychological safety. We haven't created a psychologically safe environment for people to speak up and to share what's on their minds.
Yeah, I can imagine as a leader, you're sitting there. Well, I can tell you from my own experience, you're sitting there. I have so many things I need to get the team to do. And I'm stretched already in all that I can do. And so I put that little bit more pressure on. And then I'm going to get a little frustrated because people aren't rising to the occasion. All right. And I sometimes have somebody who I just don't think is pushing as hard as they need to. And there's always one in every team that you feel like, come on, get a little more focused, a little more concentrated, work a little harder, a little smarter. I mean, it's inevitable that you think that. So then it's way too easy to the equivalent of rolling your eyes when that person says, yes, I have too much work on. All right. But when I do that, everybody else thinks, well, Wanda doesn't really care. So how do I strike the right balance between pushing the people that need to be pushed and yet creating that safety where people say, whoa, this isn't working, or this is too hard, or there's something wrong here?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about setting those really clear expectations up front. What does this actually look like? And you can think about that from the what perspective and the how perspective. So from a what perspective is, what is the outcome that is expected here? What is it that we're trying to achieve? You can describe what the task is, what the project outcome is. You can talk about the time it should take people. So I think this is where we probably don't speak up enough about this kind of, this should take you 2 hours, this should take you 2 days. And the deadline associated with that is X, Y, and Z. So I think setting those really clear expectations, being really clear with people, allows us to then come back and deliver that feedback. I think it's really difficult when we have some people who are, perceived to be really pulling their weight on the team, and then others who look like they're a bit coasting a little bit, even if they're not maybe again, this could tie in with some of the other pillars that I'm going to talk about, but maybe they're not working in an area of one of their strengths, for example. So it's taking them a little bit longer to do something. And that's a different issue completely. But I think setting out those really clear expectations to begin with allows us to be able to give candid feedback during the process, not necessarily just waiting till the end, but during the process and saying, my expectation is this should take X amount of time or at this level of quality, and you're not meeting those expectations. How can I best support you to be able to do that? And I think, again, it comes back to the leader supporting and letting the team know, I am here to support you. Even when our own plates are full, I think we need to make time for our team because they need support, and we're driving results through their tasks as well.
Right. I find with leaders that we think we've been clear about what the outcome really looks like, and we're not as clear as we think. So somebody has a different expectation than I do of what that result really is like. And sometimes that means they think it's a bigger result than I actually really am looking for. The second thing I find is that leaders are not very good at setting the boundary conditions. I don't want this or this or this or this, or this is in scope and that's out of scope, or you only have this much time. Just those boundary conditions that help people scale down sometimes what is needed to be done and how efficiently it's needed to be done. And I think that cuts out a lot of wasted energy.
Yeah, I love that approach, and I love that phrasing of putting the boundaries around it, like cutting out this, and this. I don't need that. And having that open conversation, and again, having that safe environment for people to push back and to ask questions, because I think sometimes we worry if we ask questions about how best to do our job, we may be perceived as incapable of doing our job. But actually, when we ask those questions, it shows that we want to really focus on what matters most. And I think, again, sometimes leaders struggle a little bit with creating priorities. So if you're saying my plate is full, I have so many things going on, then it becomes harder to prioritize things for other people, because you're like, well, all of this is a priority right now. Everything is really important. It's all a priority. How do we focus on, like, what is the next thing that we need to do? And how do we make sure that people are really clear about that? And again, from the other side, there's nothing more frustrating than spending a lot of time doing something only to realize that you've gone way more than, you've gone way above and beyond what was required. You spent way too much time, or it's no longer a priority. And so you spent all of this time, and now it's not really that important anymore.
We all have that experience. Like, I could have used those hours on this other thing. Why didn't you tell me where this was in the ranking, the priority? And frequently I hear people say, I didn't know you wanted a guesstimate. Like, I could have given you a guesstimate on this in an hour. To give you an exactly 100% accurate is going to take me 15 hours. Like, would you please, what's the purpose of it that you're using it for? So we get that straight.
I love that question, Wanda.
Yeah.
The what is the purpose? What will this be used for? I think is a really powerful question. David Allen as well in his book talks about what does done look like. That is also, like, when do we ever think about what does done actually look like in this situation? And I'm currently reading Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, and they talk about rumbling, and I can't remember the exact term she uses, but they go back and forth to kind of really articulate what do you need, when do you need it by, and what specifically is that. And I think it's important to really get into the specifics on those things rather than just brushing something off saying, my boss has asked me to do this, or my team member hasn't understood what I'm trying to articulate.
Right. And please don't assume that what you said is what people understood. Just clarify that what they heard, what they're thinking is what you were thinking about. All right, so we started this one, Aoife, with talking about psychological safety as the foundation for everything. And that is really important for your team to be able to push back to you to say, this is working, or I can't get this done, or I've got too much, or I don't know how to think about it. And some of the actions for creating that psychological safety have to do with your own articulation of what done looks like, of what the boundary conditions are, what's in and out of scope, timeline, etc. and some understanding of where things fall in the priority sense, how this is going to get used. Are there other things that people need to be thinking about to create psychological safety?
For me, so that clarity piece is really important. I think it's really important to show people that you care about them as well. So this, again, is not something we talk an awful lot about at work, but it's something I'm hearing a lot more about. So just showing people that you genuinely care about their well-being, about their career, about how well they're performing at their job as well. And this is not something you can fake. You have to have a genuine interest in people. And I would argue that if you don't have that genuine interest, why are you managing people to begin with? So showing people that you genuinely care for them. So being clear, showing that you care, I think being consistent in your behavior. So it's not, something's really urgent one day and then the next day it's not really urgent. If you show up in a consistent way, I think that helps to build that sense of trust, that people know what to expect, people know what they're going to get with that as well. And I think candor is really important as well. So saying things as they are, not biting your tongue, not holding back, but saying it in a constructive way that you can show people that you care about them and that you can show candor with them at the same time.
Yeah, and I would add that's a consistency. We tend to be candid with our favorites because we think we know how to deliver that message and they can take it. And I'm going to tell you, you have to do that for everybody if you're going to get there. Okay, now I have to ask you this question. Because you talk about this, what's psychological safety not? What do we take off the plate?
Yeah, there's two extremes that I see. So one extreme is being nicey all the time. We've created psychological safety because everyone is happy and comfortable and says nice things here. That's not psychological safety. You have not created psychological safety if everyone is comfortable. I think psychological safety is feeling uncomfortable having those conversations that you need to have. And then the other extreme is a license to say what you like. We have psychological safety here, therefore I can be really blunt, and it's just it's offensive to people. It's not strategic. It's not using care and candor. It's just a license to say what you want. And that's not very beneficial to the team either.
Right. Okay, I love those too. All right. So it's not being accommodating, super nice, making everybody comfortable.
Yeah.
It's also not a license to say anything I want any way I want, and too bad it's psychological safety. That doesn't get there. So again, a polarity that we have to manage. All right, so let's assume then that it's a whole notion about getting thriving at work, that I have created some degree of psychological safety, and I can tell this because my team is willing to tell me, what's not working, to push back on the agenda or the priorities, to tell me that it's too much work, that they can't handle it, legitimately so, not in a whining way, okay? And I'm not being overly nice and accommodating, and I'm not being overly aggressive or offensive either. Got a nice balance there. On top of that psychological safety, you have three main pillars that you think are essential for creating a thriving at work. So the workplace culture, the motivators and drivers, and then individual capabilities. I want to take each of them in turn. Let's start with it about the workplace culture. What is it we're trying to do, and what is it we're trying to avoid doing in the workplace culture?
Yeah, so for me, it's about creating that positive workplace culture. And I suppose it stems from experiences that I had at work. So one example was a culture where I was made promises that weren't delivered on. And if I look back, I think it wasn't a very transparent culture. So they made commitments, but then they reneged on those commitments. And I wouldn't have had the language at the time to explain exactly what was going on. I just knew that I was really frustrated with that situation. They promised me a promotion. They promoted my male colleague to be my boss. And they didn't communicate that either. So there was a lack of communication. These are probably a list of all the things that we shouldn't do at work, Wanda.
Yeah.
But all of those things. And then I was in another situation that I just didn't feel like I was fulfilling my potential. I didn't feel like I was thriving at work. And I was lucky early in my career that I knew that these kinds of organizations where you could thrive really did exist. And so, that was a real juxtaposition to be in both of those different organizations with this happening. And so what we're trying to create is a place where people, you don't have to be happy all the time, but you do need to feel a sense of positivity about the work that you're doing, about the colleagues that you're working with, about what the organization says and how they behave, how that lived experience of how you do your work on a day-to-day basis. So that's what we're trying to achieve by creating this positive workplace culture.
Right. Lovely. I love it. And I certainly have seen thousands of cases where people were reasonably happy with their manager, with the organization, with the work they're doing, and somebody dangles an opportunity that gets you very excited and very enthusiastic, and then doesn't deliver on it and doesn't explain why, and it goes to somebody else. And suddenly my satisfaction level went from good to negative territory on satisfaction.
Exactly.
And could have handled that one by saying, hey, Wanda, we thought this would be a good opportunity. We've changed our mind. Here's why. We've gone with somebody else. As hard as that message is, that's better than hearing squat and then hearing through the grapevine. It's a horrible thing to do. It puts people in crazy places too. Okay, but now I want to take a case, Aoife, because sometimes I'm leading a team and I'm trying my best to create the kind of right culture. And let's say I think somebody's ready for a promotion or a bigger opportunity, or I'm trying to put them forward on a project task force that I think is good for their growth. Okay, any of those. And my manager has a different view, or my manager's manager has a different plan of action. And I can't control what any of those superiors do or say or decide. So how do I create my own culture, my microculture, that people know they can count on me without saying, yeah, but I have this lousy manager here, which doesn't work. So how do I handle those kind of situations?
Yeah, and I have had that myself where the decisions were not being made by me. And I would pass my opinion, and then away in a locked room, a separate decision was being made, and I had to convey that decision, even though it wasn't my decision. It's so tough to do. I think we can create those micro cultures within our own teams. And I think it's about articulating what's acceptable behavior, what's not acceptable behavior, and how do we as a team work together? How do we manage? How do we communicate with each other? And exactly to your point, you can hardly go back and say, well, I have a terrible boss. I'm the leader of this team, but I have a terrible boss. You cannot say that. You cannot say that to your team. What we can do is try and create that culture. Like, this is how we want to do things around here. And I would also wonder how long that leader would stay in that position if they feel frustrated by the boss that they have to begin with as well. Would they want to move roles? Would they want to bring their team with them? Would they want to leave the organization as well?
Yeah, I can promise you from coaching people in that position that you get 2 times on that one, and then you've lost them is actually effectively leading the team. They'll keep the job, they'll go back to their day expertise work, but in terms of their investment in the team, why bother? It's my boss that's making the decision. You do all the hard work, not me. And I see that coming and going in a number of my client organizations. I hope they're all listening and paying attention to that one. I guess here's what I would say as an ideal, and I'd love to get your reaction to this, pro and con. On the one hand, I may not like the decision, and I think I can certainly represent to my employee that had I been making the decision, I might have made a different one, or here's what I lobbied for, or here's what I would have liked to have seen happen for you. Here's the decision that has been made, and recognizing that there are lots of people involved in that decision, not just my immediate manager, and lots of rationale behind it. And here's my understanding of why. So you might not be able to get that in a full thing, but you can say, for example, the belief among some of the decision makers is that you are not ready yet for this opportunity. And by that, I believe they mean X. And as I think about what that might mean, here's what I've seen in your work that I'd like to have you focus on.
Yeah.
But just a pointing in a direction of a why that gives people a thing to work on is about the only way I know out of that. So, Aoife, what's your reaction to that one?
I love that as an approach. And I think, again, going back to my own example, if I had received that, I would have seen that as something positive. Here's what I need to work on. Here's what I need to do differently, or here's why the decision was made. It's a lot more transparent. So I think there are a lot of pros associated with that. And I think if someone is receiving that feedback and it gives them maybe an insight into how the decision making works, because oftentimes we place a lot more emphasis or onus on our direct manager to make those decisions when actually there are more people involved. Like you said, it's a group of people making that decision or comparing you to other people, and it's not about your unique performance. It's about how you compare to others and what they're demonstrating versus what you're demonstrating. I think that's the real positive about taking that approach. I think that can have a really positive impact on the person and help them to, because I was in that position and I left eventually because I was really frustrated, but I also didn't have anything to aim for. I was just told that this is the decision that had been made after the fact, after finding out what am I trying to say?
Surreptitiously.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of how I found out, but I eventually left. But had it been handled in a different way, maybe I would still be there now.
Might have.
I don't know.
Might have, and I've seen that not work as well. I don't want to spend all day on this one because there are two other pillars to talk about. But I also find that sometimes managers are back to that psychological safety as trying to make everybody feel good. And so they think that the way to motivate somebody is to put them forward. And they don't have a good understanding themselves of what the criteria is for that next, whatever it is, whether it's promotion or just an opportunity. They don't understand how their person stacks up relative to their peers, people, and their other groups that might be up for that one as well. And so therefore they set a false sense of hope in their employee. And it's just like, get informed before you kind of say you think somebody's ready. Just get informed of what the criteria are. Okay, I can't resist asking this one. Let's say, suppose I inherit a team and I do have good power and I have a good manager above me, but it's a really toxic culture. What am I supposed to do to correct that toxic culture?
I think for me, it's always about calling out the elephant in the room. So you need to address it. And if you've inherited this culture and this is how people behave here, you can create a new set of norms and get buy-in from the people, because you can be sure that if it is toxic and everyone's toxic with each other, they didn't intentionally create this toxic work environment. I don't think people want to, unless it's a kind of an us and them and they're part of the in crowd and they're getting, priority treatment, they're getting favorable treatment. But I think for the majority of us, we don't want to work in a toxic culture and we'd be happy with the change. And for anyone who does not favor the change, if the change has a negative impact on them and their work, then they can leave, because to me it seems that they were part of the problem, So I think setting new norms, identifying and just verbalizing the fact that we've created this toxic culture and now we're going to do something to fix it, and getting buy-in from the team and calling out those toxic behaviors, but rewarding the behaviors that we want to see.
Yeah. Making sure you reward the right ones and not missing what's happening behind the scenes as well. I think there's power in a leader doing exactly what you said, Aoife, which is to say, look, this culture is not the culture I like to work in. So I'm not blaming anybody. It's not what I would like us to be. And it might have been my doing too. I can just sort of say, okay, it's not where I want us to be. I'd like to have a culture that does X, Y, and Z. So we're going to move in that direction. In order to move in that direction, here's what's going to change. 1, 2, 3, 4. And by the way, here's what's going to change in my behavior as well. 1, 2, 3. And here's what you can count on for me. And then consistently delivering against that. And then, as you say, calling out the bad behaviors so that I am giving that direct feedback so that people know it's noticed and it's not okay. All right. So the notion here is that, just to put it all back to where we started from, we want to be thriving at work. Yes, please. And that means that we want to drive for performance, but we want to do it in a sustainable way so that people have a sense of well-being, performance and well-being in a balanced proportion. To do that, I got to start with psychological safety, which is creating an environment where people will speak up and I will listen as the leader. It is not about being nice or about saying anything the way I want to say it. To do that, I've got to make sure I have a culture that is positive for people, even if it's a microculture where we're doing what we say we're going to do, we mean what we say, we're holding people accountable for it. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar you have is this notion of understanding drivers and motivators. What do you mean by that, and what does that actually look like?
Yeah, so our motivations are really why we get out of bed to go to work in the morning. And yes, on the one hand, you can say it's to earn money, it's to have a paycheck. But I think once you pay people a fair salary, a fair wage, then the rest is up to themselves. Like what actually motivates you, what drives you to do your work? What are you actually driven by? And so we have universal needs that everyone has. We all have unique needs as well that we have, but we also have some derailers that can get in the way. So a derailer, for example, might be something like perfectionism or wanting to be right all the time. It's something that is an inner drive that we have, but it's actually getting in the way of us building better relationships and doing our best work. So I'd be happy to talk about examples of what our universal needs are, what our unique needs are, or how they actually apply in the workplace.
Okay, let's talk about, so universal needs are things like I need to have a house over my head. I need to feel that I have some respect for work. I need to know that I can pay reasonable bills.
I'm talking about psychological needs here. So there's three fundamental psychological needs that we all have, which are autonomy, relatedness, and competence. So autonomy being a sense of choice and control over what we do and how we do it. Relatedness is how we get along with other people or how we relate what we're doing to the bigger picture of what it is that we're trying to achieve. And then competence is feeling capable of doing the role. So those are our three universal psychological needs. And then we have different unique needs, which could be something like stability at work, or it could be variety in the kind of work that we do. It could be something like recognition or a higher purpose and things like that.
I want to make sure then that everybody has some degree of autonomy. And granted, some people want a little more and some people want a little less. That everybody has a degree of relatedness, connection, and that everybody feels somewhat competent to do their job. Again, there'll be degrees of how much I need to feel competent versus I'm willing to take a risk on it. All right. So that's a baseline for what I do for everybody. Then I need to understand each person who's working for me unique needs. Like, do they want stability? Are they focused on taking risks? Do they want recognition? What else? There's many of those, but what else? How do I go about discovering what the unique needs are?
I think for me, and this will apply to the universal needs as well, because as you mentioned, Wanda, people will have a different need and it's about getting that balance right. So too much autonomy, you could be floundering. You were so fixated on not becoming a micromanaging boss that we give people too much freedom and actually they end up floundering because they're trying to figure things out. They're wasting a lot of energy trying to figure out what those expectations actually are. What is it that I should be working on? I think a key way to find out is asking people. We don't have to talk about needs. You don't have to be, you don't have to feel like you're being really needy, but you can say, this is how I do my best work, or this is where I'm being blocked, or this is where I feel really frustrated at work. And I think if you're a leader, you can open those kinds of conversations because you want to support people to be able to do their best work. And you are in a position to be able to support them, to be able to meet their needs, hopefully. And so if they have a need for recognition, you know that that's something that's going to drive them. And so if you, a simple thank you, or I noticed that you worked late the other day, or you finished that project ahead of time, or you handled that difficult call with a client really well, just noticing those behaviors. And this is, recognition is one of my unique needs, if you like. And so it lights me up when I hear someone saying, I noticed you do that, or you did that really well. Or for me, even public recognition from my manager is really motivating for me. and that's beyond whatever you're getting paid to do on a day-to-day basis.
I mean, so a lot of people that I see have a basic need of recognition like you do. And you're right. If I know that as a manager or even as a peer working with you, and I can give you a bit more of that, I'm going to see your face light up with it. And I'm also going to get the best out of you. You're going to feel like it's giving a bit more. It's really powerful. It's so easy to see if you start paying attention to it. The only way to notice that, though, is to ask people, what is it that really puts you at your best? And sometimes people have good language for it, sometimes they don't. But having 5 or 6 things that you find really motivate people can be enormously helpful on doing that. And please, please, please don't assume that what motivates you as an individual is what motivates someone else as an individual.
Exactly.
It's not the same.
I think we often fall into that trap. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't love that public recognition. It makes me uncomfortable. I like it from individuals and from particular places, but that big, it makes me nervous. So I can then underestimate how much other people do value it and then not give it. I also find if you'll use the language, like if somebody really wants predictability or stability, and I use that language, I say, Aoife, I want to make sure that you have time to be sure that you've thought through all the contingencies in this project. I'm going to make you much more comfortable on that one.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
exactly it.
All right. So it's down to understanding those kind of how people are doing on their core psychological needs, the autonomy, the relatedness, and the competence, getting that balance right for them, and then understanding 1, maybe 2, unique individual drivers that really light somebody up. Things like stability or recognition or the power to call the shots and make the decisions or feeling like they're part of the club, that, belonging kind of sense, or that they can be of service to someone somewhere in the universe, or that they can take some chances, change things up. Like those are kind of some core ideas that you can begin to think about for individuals. And some just thrive on the creativity. Can I do something different, unique?
Yeah.
All right. So we've got the psychological safety. We've also got the first pillar, which has to do with the culture. We've got the second pillar of understanding individual drivers and motivators. And now we come to this third pillar, which you call individual capabilities, compounding capabilities, and organizational capabilities. Okay, please translate. What do you mean by that, and why do those matter?
Yeah. So when I first was thinking about this chapter, for me, it was all about strengths and understanding strengths at work. And dare I say, I don't think we talk about this enough. I certainly didn't when I worked in corporate. We didn't have conversations. You may know that someone is good with Excel, but what's actually driving that? Is it that they're good at analysis? Is it that they like creating the tables? Is it that they like to interrogate the data? Like what actually is their core strength when it comes to that? And so beyond just thinking about individual strengths, I thought it's really important to understand, because strengths don't operate in a vacuum. We operate with other people as well. And sometimes a strength that we have that is a complementary strength to what someone else has. So an example of that would be someone who's very detail oriented and likes that kind of step by step versus someone who's very big picture, visionary, can paint that picture. Those two people working together would really excel, but they may also antagonize each other because they don't really understand where each other is coming from. So the person who is the step-by-step may think that the visionary is a bit of a dreamer and not kind of grounded in reality, whereas the person who's the visionary may think that the step-by-step detail-oriented person is a bit of a stick in the mud because they're trying to bring them back down to trying to figure out exactly how this is going to turn into reality. So I wanted to look at that bigger picture in terms of teams, because we're working with other people all the time, and it's important to understand what our own strengths are, what we bring to the table, but also how we work with other people. And then taking that to the organizational level, thinking about the systems that we have in place and how we use AI and how we learn at work, but also what are the things that get in the way of us being able to do our best work. We talk about deep work and we talk about getting into a state of flow, but how often do we have the opportunity to do that, and why not? Is it because we have too many pointless meetings, too many emails flooding our inboxes, busy work, lack of collaboration, focusing on the wrong things, so lack of prioritization as well. So I wanted to address all of that to clear the decks, to focus on what am I as an individual really good at, and who do I need to work with so that we can do our best work together.
Yeah, it's an important point. I mean, we all have our strengths, and we're all going to default to using those strengths and understanding. I like your point. I might be good at Excel, but what is it I'm really good at Excel? Because when I dig under what I'm really good at, what I really like about it, then I can translate that across multiple different activities that will be quite useful. Okay, but I also find that one of the greatest tensions between two people trying to work together are when they have complementary strengths. All right, so one of the big ones is I'm detailed, you're big picture. It's not true. I am not detailed. Ask anybody who works with me. I value it. I respect it. I'm glad I have people working with me, but then it starts to irritate me. Like it just, and as I can imagine, my constantly describing the big picture or where we're trying to head or the connecting point can irritate somebody who's detail oriented, who wants to get down to the practical, dot the I's and cross the T's. And I am just like, I have no patience for it. So we often end up conflicting on exactly the skills that we need each other for. So what's your advice there?
I think just having an open conversation and recognizing what each person brings to the table is really important, because I think similar to when it comes to needs, for example, we assume that other people have the same needs that we have, and we try and motivate and manage people in that same way. I think sometimes we assume that other people have the same strengths that we have. And if someone doesn't, or if they can't see things the way we see them, it's really important to get under the skin and really understand that it's not one is better than the other. It's just that they're different, they're complementary. If we bring these people together and work together, then the sum is going to be greater than, the sum is going to be greater than the
whole is
parts.
better than the sum of the parts. I always say it backwards too.
The sum of the parts. That's exactly it. That's what I was trying to say. So I think just an acknowledgement, and also an acknowledgement of it can be extremely frustrating, and on both sides you're going to feel that tension, but acknowledge that, okay, so this is the tension that we talked about, and here it is coming out, and here's my frustration because they're not getting what it is I'm trying to explain, or they don't see my perspective, or they don't see the value I bring to this equation. So I think just getting it out in the open and then trying to see from the other person's perspective.
Yeah, I've seen more teams than you can imagine where conflict between individuals on the team, and it's usually a group of individuals against one. Occasionally it's a half and half, but usually against one, comes down to some of those basic core strengths or basic preferences in how you work. There are not very many of them, but boy, can they turn into a big drama. And being able to have a conversation about it is what's going to create. So there we are back to the psychological safety as your foundation.
Yeah.
There we are back to how we make sure we create a workplace that's not toxic. Right there is an example of how to do it. And it's also about understanding what's the driver for somebody. Because if the detail is a driver for one person, but it's not for me, I got to respect that one.
Yeah.
So we have individual capabilities. We have how those capabilities fit together with and not so smoothly with other individuals on the team. And then we have organizational capabilities like systems that allow us to do work, which can both help us and get in our way at the same time.
That's exactly it.
Okay. All right. So the the practice, the experience to create an environment where people feel that they can thrive at work, meaning we are performing in a healthy, sustainable way. I have to start with psychological safety. We've said that many, many times, what that is and what that isn't. It's not about being nice, but it is about being able to have people say back what's working and not working for them. In addition to that, I have 3 pillars. I have, number 1, creating a culture, a microculture, where it's consistent and honest and fair. Word you didn't use, but I just put in.
Yeah, no,
2,
yeah.
2, it is about understanding the individual drivers and motivators, where people are both on the psychological needs as well as on their unique individual needs. being able to use that language, being able to recognize that, being able to understand that it might not be just like me or like my favorite people on the team. And then the third is recognizing individual strengths, preferences, capabilities, how those complement and conflict with the team capabilities and complement and conflict with the organizational capabilities. All right, then one last word. Sitting on top of all of that, Aoife, is an individual's leadership, my leadership in this particular case. You want to just give us 2 sentences on what that is?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So when I started looking at leadership, it was really about leading ourselves first. So how do we grow in self-awareness? How do we understand what triggers us? How we manage and respond to emotional triggers rather than just reacting to them? And it's only then that we think about how do we then lead other people and how do we lead them. I love Liz Wiseman's model around creating multipliers. So how do we become a multiplying leader rather than a diminisher?
Sounds all good to me. I think we could do a whole other podcast on that topic of itself. But I really like this notion of how you create, in effect, the culture around you, where you will get performance, you will get that kind of commitment and engagement that we're all looking for. And people have a sense of thriving, that they feel like they can do their best without killing themselves day in and day out. I think it's a lovely thing to be thinking about. What does that all look like and how do I create it, even if it doesn't exist above me? Okay, Aoife O'Brien, my guest today, the book we're talking about is Thriving Talent. Highly recommended, very readable, great book, lots of great advice. If somebody wanted to find you, where's the best place to reach out to you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. thrivingtalentbook.com. You'll find all of the links about the book, so where to buy it. You'll find out more information, what people have said about the book as well. If you want to connect with me through my podcast, I also have a podcast called Happier at Work. Or if you want to find me on LinkedIn, I'll spell out my name because not everyone is going to get it. It's spelled Aoife and it's Aoife O'Brien.
Aoife O'Brien. Aoife, great. I've loved the conversation. I think it's fabulous. Congratulations on a great book.
Thank you so much.
All right, and to everybody listening, if you'd like to watch this conversation rather than just hear us talk, then please head over to the YouTube channel at Out of the Comfort Pod. You will see there the entire video, as well as some short clips and some other things that you might find useful. We love to hear from you, so go check out outofthecomfortzone.com. Send us an email at any time. Throw in your questions. We always like to do sessions where we address some of those questions that have not been addressed thus far. And otherwise, join us next week for another episode in Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone.